If you're moving to Lansing, Michigan and planning to buy a home, then there really are some things that you need to know. Because whether this is your first time buying a home or your 70th time buying a home, the process is not the same in every single state. So you really need to pay attention to a lot of the concepts I'm going to be talking about here. So in this video, I'm going to be explaining a 10-step process of buying a home in Lansing, Michigan, how sometimes it compares to other states. I'm going to give you some tips of what I do to help a buyer be able to win an offer, but also how to make it a smooth process, because when you're coming from another state, it's something that's extremely stressful. So I'm gonna get started with this new episode right now. And if this is your first time to the channel, my name is 𝐴. I am a top producing realtor in the Greater Lansing, Michigan area. I help people relocate from all over the country, even all around the world, to help them find a house here in the Greater Lansing, Michigan area. So I'm just gonna get right to it with the step-by-step process, because when you're looking to buy a home, it's just helpful for you to know. And again, this isn't for first-time home buyers. This is also for people who have bought homes many times, but maybe you're coming from a different area and you're not really familiar with the buying process in another state. So the first step in buying a home that I highly recommend is doing a buyer consultation. And a buyer consultation is where I sit down, I speak with you and talk with you about your goals. So that could be 3 days down the road, 30 days down the road when you're looking to buy a home, 3 months, 3 years even. Whatever that timeline looks like, I would love to be able to talk with you if you're watching this channel and you're looking to make a move here. So all my contact information is in the description below. And through talking on the phone or a Zoom call, like I prefer face-to-face on a Zoom, whatever that is, we would schedule an appointment. I would talk to you about your goals, your budget, what neighborhoods you potentially want to be in, what type of schools you want to be in. We talk about what your long-term and short-term goals might be. And all of this is just to make sure that we're all on the same page. And then during this buyer consultation is when I kind of ask you, hey, are you looking to finance this with cash, or are you looking to potentially finance this? And if you are looking to finance it, then I give you some lender options, which takes you to step number 2. So we have the buyer consultation and I speak with you just about your goals, give you an idea of some of the costs involved. But step 2 is getting pre-approved, preferably with a local lender. So getting pre-approved with a local lender. And some of you who are researching this channel, researching moving here, you might have already gotten pre-approved through somebody online. And getting pre-approved, yes, that is a good thing, but just letting you know, from somebody who does this day in and day out every single day, being with a local lender is going to help your offers win. If you're going to be with an online company, if you're doing an out-of-area bank, sometimes a listing agent might see your offer. They might be a little hesitant because they never dealt with that bank, and they might go with another offer if it's a competing offer situation. So getting with a local lender is key. In the description below, I do have a local lender contact that is highly respected, that people love using. So if you want to have that contact and just reach out to them, feel free to do it. And also there are other lenders that I do use besides that one in the description. So if you want to have an option of 2 or 3, I can definitely give you those. But getting pre-approved is key. Also, if the lender is good, they're gonna give you an idea of all the closing costs that are involved. And if you're coming from another state, those closing costs could be higher or lower than what you're used to. Here in Michigan, you can count on closing costs being on average about 2.7% of the purchase price. However, it depends on what purchase price you have. If it's a lower purchase price, like around $200,000, then you can count on your closing costs being at least 3% of the purchase price. If you do have a different loan type, you might be able to have more of your closing costs maybe paid for by the seller, but on average, your closing costs will be around 3% of the purchase price. But if it's a higher end home, like $700,000 or $800,000 home, you might be closer to around 2% of the purchase price. So again, it just kind of depends on what price point you're at when you make a move here. And that's where the lender will be able to tell you, hey, here are what the property taxes are gonna be. Here's how much money you're gonna have down. So getting with that local lender is gonna be key. It's gonna help you with your budget to make sure that that is solidified as well, so that you'll be ready, because step number 3 then in the buying process is then being able to sign a buyer agreement right before we tour homes. So there's a settlement that happened a couple years ago where it was required that you sign a buyer agreement before you tour homes. And basically in that buyer agreement, it states that I, like if you were working with me, I am your realtor and you're gonna commit to using me. It shows the percentage of compensation that's on there, but the thing I will tell you is that you can write that compensation in an offer to the seller to have the seller pay your buyer agent. And more times often than not in the Lansing area, they will abide by that. So we can't say, hey, it's free to use an agent, but essentially like it kind of is a little bit, because we don't get paid until the house closes as a buyer's agent, but the seller will usually pay for that fee. Usually, I can't say always, but if you write it in the contract, they will usually pay for that fee. So we sign that buyer agency agreement. That is step 3. And that's when we get into step 4, which is the fun part, touring homes and showing homes to you. So we walk in and you get a feel for the house. You might say, hey Troy, can you ask the agent this question? But I point out things to you. And if you want to get a really good idea of how I show homes to people, I do have a video that I just did where I give you an idea of what it's like to tour a home with me, so you can get a feel of that. So I don't just let you walk in and then you just figure it out yourself. I do give my input on some of these things. Then if you really like the home, there are some things that I can ask the agent, like, hey, can you give me utility costs? And then also, as well, like I will look at comparables. I'll make sure that the comparables within the neighborhood and within the area line up to what your purchase price is, so that you can have all the data that you need. That's how I typically take care of it. And then in step 5, we get ready to write a strong offer. So we get ready to write and I call it a strong offer, not just an offer, a strong offer, because if you have the local lender and if we look at the comparables, we see what purchase price we should try to aim for, then I try to write as strong of an offer as I possibly can. And I'm not gonna give away all my secrets on here because there could be some agents within my area who are watching this and I don't wanna give away all my secrets. But I will tell you that the ratio that I have from actually presenting an offer to it getting accepted is quite high. And I will give you ideas on what you can do to help make your offer strong, but to where you're going to be comfortable. Because there are some things as an agent that I do not suggest. I don't suggest waiving inspections, but there are some things I can do to help sweeten it. I don't necessarily want you to become poor when you buy a house, but there are some things that I could help make a little bit more enticing to a seller if they decide to accept the offer. Those are really the only secrets I'm gonna give you. What I also do is I call that listing agent and I find out as many specifics as I can. And why do I do that? Because I want to present the strongest offer that I possibly can. And that it's not just based on price, but maybe on what the seller needs or what the seller wants. So I do go above and beyond that way to be able to call that agent to find out, hey, how many offers do you have? Is there anything that you can tell me about the offers? And so I do all of that to be able to present the strongest offer possible. So again, step 5, presenting that strong offer. Then, if your offer gets accepted, then what happens is in the timeline of our offer, we typically put a contingency in for inspections and for your financing. So that in the timeline, typically within our offers in the Greater Lansing area, we typically start with inspections. Now that's gonna be a little bit different than some states that are watching this. If you're from a state where it's an attorney review state, you might have 3 days where the attorney can review the documents and things can change. You could have a due diligence period. We don't have that in Michigan. Basically, when you accept the contract and it is bottom lined by the seller, when a seller bottom lines your contract and accepts your offer, then there really isn't a due diligence period or an attorney review. We are not an attorney review state. So the timelines start with the inspections. And so what I tell everybody with inspections is you can plan on it being out of your pocket for the cost. On average in our area for general, pest, and radon inspections, it's on average around $600 to $700 depending on who you use. I give you a list of inspectors that I trust, not just one, I give you a list. But general pests and radon, those are things that you're gonna wanna do. Radon, it's in about 25% of all Michigan homes. If you're coming from Colorado, it might be in every single home in Colorado, but in Michigan, about 25, maybe to 30% of the homes, so you're gonna wanna have that test done. And then if you're in an older home and it has an old cast iron pipe that leads out to the city sewer, you're gonna wanna have what's known as a sewer scope. If you are buying a country property and you're in a county that it's not required to have have what's known as a point of sale inspection where they do a mandatory well septic inspection, then you're gonna wanna have the well and septic also inspected, and that would cost you $300 to $400 if you're in a non-point of sale county, but you wanna inspect those things. But in Michigan, there are a couple counties, Ingham County, which makes up a lot of the Lansing area, and then also Shiawassee County, which is over like in Lanesburg, Perry. If you buy a house in one of those two areas, the seller has to do a mandatory well septic inspection, and it has to pass what we call conformance. Now, if you're in Massachusetts watching this channel, that is, I think you have to do it all throughout the state, well septic. It's mandatory for that inspection to happen. And if you're in New Jersey, you have mandatory smoke detector and carbon monoxide, I guess, sort of inspections that have to be passed. And that does not happen in Michigan. Like really the only mandatory one that would have to have is if you're in Ingham County or Shiawassee County on a country property where one of those things or both of those things have to be inspected. So then we have our inspection, and then we come together, and step 7 is negotiating inspections. Then we look at the inspection report and we talk about what are some things that could be reasonable to do. And you could ask for a price reduction. You could ask for a credit to go towards maybe some of your closing costs you have to pay your lender. And then also, another thing that you could do is ask for nothing if everything's good. So there are different options that you could have, and more likely or more often than not, you will probably ask for something on inspections. That's the expectation I give my sellers too, is that they're probably gonna ask for something. And so we talk about what you are comfortable with, what you're most comfortable with, and then we present an addendum asking that seller to be able to cover whatever's in there, whether they want to cover the repairs, whether you want to ask for a credit. We talk about what you're going to be most comfortable with. Then if the seller accepts that, then we move into the appraisal and underwriting part. And this is where you become what I like to call best friends with the lender. And you don't necessarily say bye-bye to me, but the times that we have of showing homes and me being there for inspections, they're done. And so then it's gonna be on you to be able to present all your documents to the lenders, your employment, your income, your bank accounts, anything that they're asking for, and then they will do an appraisal on the house. They'll send an appraiser out, or they might waive the appraisal if you do give a certain amount down. Now, I should have said this from the beginning for step 8. If you have given cash for payment for the house that you're looking to buy, then you can just skip ahead. Go to step 10 for this, okay? So you can skip ahead, you get a little bit of a pass. But what I'm gonna talk to you about now is for people who are trying to use a mortgage company to be able to help finance their loan. So what will happen is the appraisal will happen. We'll see if the purchase price supports what the appraiser shows for the value of the home. If it does, great, just goes to underwriting. But if there is a difference in the appraisal process, then Troy comes back, and he wants or needs to talk to that agent to be like, hey, the appraisal fell short. And this is the time where you can negotiate. If the appraisal falls short of what your purchase price is for the loan, then we gotta start doing some talking here. But again, if the appraisal is good, then you don't have to worry about it. And then what happens is the loan company says, all right, now we need some last minute things. We need some pay stubs. We need to verify your income. You need to get homeowners insurance. All these things start happening, and then they take it into underwriting for a final approval. Okay, so all this stuff usually is a 2-week process. I, as a buyer's agent, become a little bit more distant, but you really have to have access to all these documents to help make the loan move along so that you can meet the close date that is in the purchase agreement, which is usually going to be around 30 days on average from when you submit an offer. And then what happens after that, if it goes through final underwriting and the loan company gives you a thumbs up, then step 9, we get clear to close. What does that mean for clear to close? You in the state of Michigan have at least 3 business days where you have to get some sort of closing disclosure to be able to review the numbers. And then if that's the case and like everybody signs off on it and everyone's good with it, then we can submit a closing date to a title company, because we close at title companies. Attorneys in other states might schedule the closing for you. In our state, myself as an agent, like I would have to be the one typically to do that for you. So we get with the title company about 3 business days out. and we schedule the closing. And then step 10, this is honestly, like, with knowing the agents in our area, you would be surprised how many people don't do part of step number 10. So step number 10 is then your final walkthrough and closing. And what I typically do, I guess with the way that the contract is written in our purchase agreement, is you have within 48 hours of the close date to be able to walk through the property and be okay with it. I typically want to do the final walkthrough with my clients right before closing. Why? Well, let me give you, for instance, last night we had a downpour of rain, like a huge rainstorm. If I would have done the final walkthrough with my client 2 days before closing, and then the rainstorm happened the next night and we didn't walk through it again, there could be water in that basement for all we know. We have no idea what happened. And I heard on Facebook, on all these social media sites, people saying, I got water in my basement. In fact, I had a listing appointment next week that had to be postponed because that person did get water in their basement. So I want to do the final walkthrough as close to closing as possible. That's when I typically like to do it. So I include the final walkthrough and closing in the same step because usually you'll do your final walkthrough, you'll make sure everything is good, nothing has changed since you last walked through it, everything's working, and then we go to the close table and we sign. Now, if in your offer, you offered to the seller, hey, you can stay afterwards, after closing, then they still might have their furniture in there. But you're still signing, it's still in your name, and then at the closing, if you have to do utilities in your name because you're occupying the property at closing, then you transfer the utilities in your name. If the seller is staying there afterwards, then you just wait to transfer the utilities until they're out of there. But the closing table should be a day of celebration. It should be something that's stress-free for you. I am there at the closing with you, there for support, to just tie up any loose ends that might be happening, any questions that you might have. I try to get keys for you, garage door openers if you are occupying the property that day. And then after that, I just never talk with you again. No, not at all. I actually then tell everybody who I talk to, this is not the last time we interact. In fact, ask me questions at any time. And I hear from my clients all throughout the year who have questions on things. I don't look at this as a transaction. I look at it as a relationship with people. And so I like to keep in contact with my clients as much as possible. So even if something comes up, even 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, a month later, 6 months later, a year later, whatever time frame that is, I still like to keep in contact with my clients. So hopefully with the process, this gives you an idea of how the process goes. And again, if you're coming from another state, just remember we're not an attorney review state in Michigan. We're very similar to Texas. If you're coming here from Texas, we're very similar to that, like just with the process. And we're also very similar to Ohio, Indiana, like some Midwestern states. But we are a little different than Illinois. They're an attorney review state, New York. Pennsylvania has really high closing costs from what I understand. So if you're coming from Pennsylvania, you might have a break in your closing costs. Florida, we're very similar to as far as the closing process. But if you're coming from a different state, other than some of the ones I mentioned, I would love to be able to just talk with you about how the process goes more in depth, talk to you about strategy as well. Just giving you a little bit of a sneak peek, but not telling you all my ideas out here out in the open. So if you are looking to move here in 9 days, 90 days, 9 months from now, feel free to contact me anytime. All my contact information, it's in the description below. And again, if you want to get on my calendar for a Zoom, that's what I prefer. But even calling, texting me, emailing me, that's fine too. And if you like this video, I would appreciate a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already done so, because you will get notified of new episodes of Lansing, Michigan Life going live, and we have new episodes going live once or twice a week. So you're not going to want to miss anything that is going on with Lansing, Michigan. And we are the #1 YouTube relocation channel in the area with over 100 videos. So you're going to want to be able to scroll through and maybe find that suburb, find a little bit something more in depth there. Feel free to scroll at any time. So until next time, everybody, I hope you take care and make it a great day.